Hey guys, welcome to Mr. Smith's Kitchen. I'm Brian, Mr. Smith Kitchen, as always. And today's another one of the canning video days. By now, you have seen us make tomato sauce, salsa, and rotel. And I'm going to kind of take a break from tomatoes, mostly because I'm waiting on more to turn red. Because we still have spaghetti sauce to do, whether it be the marinara or the meat sauce or both, but we still have those to do, but that's okay. I am tomatoed out after doing everything we have done tomato-wise for the moment. So I thought we'd switch gears. As I was cleaning out the freezer, I noticed I had a huge abundance of pot roast. Some of it already chopped up for stew meat, some of it still in pot roast fashion in the 2-pound chunks. So I thought, you know what, let's just go ahead and can some of this up. I'm down to my last can of pot roast anyhow, or beef chunks. So let's just go ahead and get this out of the freezer. Because what I do is, and I know I've said this before, is I'll buy the manager specials, and it doesn't matter what it is, bring it home and I'll put it in the freezer. Hamburger, steaks, whatever. I'm all about buying discounted meat as long as it doesn't look like it's death worn over. I will purchase it. And that's how I got all this pot roast. I ended up with 11 pounds, 12 pounds of pot roast. And it probably didn't cost me more than $28, I think, total. So in order to do your pot roast, because I'm going to keep this video fairly reasonably timed, I went ahead and did everything in advance, but what I did was I took that whole pot roast. Every pot roast that you buy out there, with the exception of, I think, a London broil, usually has a fat cap on it. That's that big chunk of fat. You want to cut that off. And that holds true with any meat you can. You don't want the fat in there. Fat can inhibit your cans getting up to the proper temperature. So you cut that off, and then you want to cut it into about 3/4 inch chunks, no bigger than 1 inch, but about 3/4 inch chunks. That way, it gets cooked all the way through when it cans. And then the next step I did was put it in the oven, and then you'll find out the rest when we get down to the counter. But that being said, it's okay to do. So this is the first time this year we've been using the pressure can. Well, we use the pressure can. Remember, we've been water bath canning up until this point. So there are some nuances to it. Pressure canning, if not done properly, can be inherently dangerous all the way around. You could not cook your food up to the proper temperature and not kill the botulism. The chances of you blowing up your pressure can are very slim because there's all kinds of safety measures on it. But all the same, that could happen. Very, very slim chance. Or you could, abuse a pressure canner and it just doesn't cook properly, which could lead to trouble down the road. So we'll talk about those also, which is also why I skip forward in some of the stuff of prepping it. But it's easy. It's literally pot roast or whatever kind of meat you desire, cut into 3/4 to 1 inch chunks, and you're going to want a beef broth for this. That's it. And in this case, I heated up 4 quarts of beef broth. Last thing you might think is, why would you can up pot roast when you just keep it in your freezer and use it as you need? You're right. You can. But what if your freezer goes down? That was my first thought. But then also, like in our household, we're a family. There's a lot going on in our house all the time. Not only do I have a full-time job, but I also try to run an in-home bakery, made-to-order bakery. Chris works full-time. The kids have school. There's homework, after-school activities, just all kinds of stuff going on. So there are some nights when we don't have all the time in the world to cook something. Now, I do have plenty of crock pot dishes that we could start in the morning if we know in advance. Let's just say you get home that day and you're tired and you just don't really feel like cooking. Well, by doing this meat will already be cooked, so you're literally just warming it back up. So I could do beef and noodles in like 15 minutes. I could do a beef stew. I could make chili with it. And it doesn't take nearly that amount of time, that it would. It's not an all-day affair like it would be otherwise. Simply throw it in the pot and go. All right, well, let me get you down here to the counter, and we'll look at a few things. Before I forget, if you're new, welcome. If you're returning, thank you. And thank you if you're new for just stopping by. Subscribe button, don't forget to hit it, or box. Notification bell right next to it, that lets you know when my videos come out. And thumbs up, thumbs down, always important. Lets me know how I'm doing, and it gets us out in the algorithm so we can grow our neighborhood, because we're all about being good neighbors, right? Comments, of course, bring them on. I like to respond in some way, shape, or form, usually with another comment. When you guys do, I think that's awesome. Communication is the key, and it lets me know how things are going. You know, not only with you, but with our community, with me, you know, stuff like that. Thumbs up, thumbs down also puts us in the algorithm along with you subscribing. So those are all very important if we're going to grow our neighborhood and continue to grow it. All right, so anyhow, enough jibber jabber. Let's get down to the counter and see what we can get into. All right, I'll be back in 1 second. All right, we're down here at the counter, and what we've done, I skipped ahead a few steps just to save us some time. I know canning videos can be quite long. So what I did was I took all the meat we had, which was 11 pounds. I've got a full-size baking sheet here, and then I've still got one in the oven just staying warm. And I put them in the oven for 30 minutes at 425 to slightly cook them, not completely. We don't want them to be fall apart tender. Almost rare to medium rare. We're just looking to brown the outsides because they're going to continue to cook inside the pressure canner. And then, of course, I have my pressure canner sitting over here warming up, and I've only got 2 inches of water in there in the bottom, only 2 inches. Unlike water bath canning, we're not filling it completely over top of the cans. We got to rely on that steam from the pressure building to get the temperature up to 240 degrees. On pressure canning, you pressure can because you need that temperature up from 240 to 250 to be able to kill the botulism. The acidity level is not high enough in this in meats to kill off botulism water bath canning, which is why you have to pressure can it. And in this pot right here, I've got 4 quarts of beef broth. So let me go ahead and get, as always, I got my jars sitting in the hot water bath. After I washed them in hot soapy water, rinsed them off and let them air dry. That way I know they're clean, even though I'm reusing them. They're from last year, year before that. It's hard to say with the quart jars. But I've had them for a while, so they didn't cost me anything. Now, this is really, really easy to do. Pressure canning is not hard. It's a little more challenging than water bath canning because you can't really walk away from it. Where water bath canning, you can at least go in the other room and watch TV. I stay with my canner. I'm also using wide mouth jars compared to the smaller normal jars. So that way it's easier to get the meat in them. I use these for all my meats and most of like sliced apples and stuff. They're easier to get in and out of. Kind of like when I do my oranges. So just like anything else, we're going to pack these with the meat, and we're going to do, we got to fill them up to 1 inch. Now 1 inch is really easy on these. You should still use a measuring stick if you have one, but this lip right here is 1 inch. So I just know that I shouldn't fill them up above that. We don't have to add any acetic acid to it or anything like that because we're pressure canning it. That makes a big difference. So all we want to do is just go ahead and grab a spatula, or if you have a scoop of some sort, and we're going to start filling these, and I'm going to try to make sure I don't drop any more on the floor. When you get a large quantity of meats, you know, and in this case we have a fairly large quantity of meat. We ended up with 11-ish, almost 12 pounds of pot roast. Because what I do, like I think I've mentioned this before in the past, when I go to the grocery store, I always go to the end of the meat section or somewhere in the meat section. They always have this little spot where they put all the meat that's, you know, about to be unsellable. Well, you know, unsellable really is still sellable. So I'll get that stuff that's only got a day or so left before it technically expires, because you can bring it home and put it in your freezer. Now, one thing I did not explain was the fact I have it into chunks. So your meat chunks, you wanna cut your pot roast up or whatever it is you're doing in chunks. You can do any type of beef with this. This holds true for chicken too. This is the exact same process for chicken, which I have a video on that I may redo. It's 2 parts. It's really long, but you would cut your chicken into chunks, about 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch chunks, and roast them the same way. Or if you just have a small amount you want to do, like say you want to give it a try, or a large amount, whatever, you can do this on the stovetop, or even on your grill. You just don't want to cook it all the way through. Say you want some pot roast or some beef chunks that you want to have that seared taste. Then by all means, throw it on your cast iron or your nonstick and sear it up. So anyhow, we've got our beef cut into about 3/4 inch chunks, 1/2 inch chunks. We put them in the oven at 425 for 30 minutes. And now we're just putting it in here. While I was doing that, I just heated up my beef broth, which we'll talk about here in a second. And as I do these, just so you can see, now see it's up to that 1 inch mark now, right? But let's tap it down a little bit. You don't want to push it down, because you want that space in there. You want the liquid to be able to go in between there. You pack it down, you may not get the center up to 240 degrees. So we'll go ahead and get that packed down real quick. And here, I'll show you what I'm going to do next, just because I got to get the other one out of the oven and all that good stuff. So what we'll do next, now that we've got it packed down, we're going to take our broth. And I could add some more meat chunks to that. Oh, matter of fact, why don't we? Let's just make that as full as possible. We'll add a little more of these chunks in here, just like such. We just don't want to go above that 1 inch line, if at all possible. Alright, so we got it a little fuller than we wanted to. So, let's take some of it out. Just like that. We're at 1 inch, can't beat that. With a stick, we're just going to take some of our broth. Now I'm using beef broth. You can, I don't know why you'd want to, but you could use tomato juice for this. You could just use water. You could add seasonings into this. We make a mushroom and beef, mushrooms and beef and gravy sometimes, and we can it, and it's got all kinds of seasonings in it. You just can't add flour or anything like that. No pastas, no flours, no dairy. So we've got that right there. We're at the 1 inch mark, I know, because I'm at that line, which is the 1 inch mark. I'm going to take a utensil of some sort. A lot of people will tell you not to use metal in your glass. So you wouldn't want to use a metal fork, but you could use a plastic fork. Now, that being said, I've never actually seen anybody break a glass using metal. But, proper practice is a wooden skewer. If you have your measuring tool that you bought, you can use it. But you want something plastic to hit that up with. And then we're just going to simply wipe our ring, or the lip of our jar, just like such, because there might be some grease on there. So I just got some hot water. Wow, that's really hot. And I'm wiping that clean, make sure there's nothing on it. And just like all the tomato stuff we did, put our ring on there, or our lid on there, our ring on there, just like that. Finger tight, not crushing tight, just use your fingers and make it tight. Alright, and then I'm just going to simply set this aside into the pressure canner. Now, my pressure canner, with being 23 quart Presto, will hold 7 of these. So let me go ahead and get the rest of these filled up, and then we will talk about what we're going to do next. All right, I'll be back in one moment. Okay, so we got all our jars filled with our pot roast, our diced pot roast, cubed meat, and our broth up to 1 inch to the rim. And there they are. We got 7 quarts out of it, which is kind of cool because that's exactly what it my pressure canner holds. So I'll be with me 1 second. I had to grab the lid. So let's talk about pressure canners for just 1 second, because this is kind of important. I'm gonna bring you down to the counter real quick so we can look over the lid. The lid's the most important part. When it comes to your pot, you want to make sure it doesn't have any cracks or big dents, dings, things like that, defects, because that can be bad. Now, I can't officially tell you that if, say, your pot is dented, you can fix it, but I've learned from experience with our old water bath canner that you can. So, first thing I want to look at is this gauge right here. Is it at 0? Now, once every year or two, you want to take this off and have it tested to make sure, and you can do that. There's always a weights and measures department in about every city, or you can send it off, or you can just replace it. But they're expensive. I know I have a backup. But you want to take it, make sure it measures right. You also have this little rubber seal right here, or this rubber ring right here. A gasket knob goes through. That is I've got too much pressure in it, and what'll happen was, back in the day before this was put on here, if you build up pressure and you weren't paying attention and it got too high, your canister could explode. I mean, that's just the basic truth. Now, if this gauge goes above 15 psi, which nothing in the state of Ohio or below 1,000 feet of elevation ever goes that high. Well, even if you're above elevation, it never goes above 13. This will blow. You have this little button here that goes up and down, and what that does is, when you get enough pressure build up in the can that it becomes too safe to take the lid off and you're almost to the point where you start to hit your timer, that'll pop up and it locks your lid in place. And that right there is your vent, which has a weight that when the temperature gets right, it will get on there. And in this one's case, this particular kind of canner's case, this shouldn't really move. But what it does, it's a regulator. It regulates how much pressure's in there. This is a Presto canner for those that are new with me and have never canned before. I absolutely love this canner. They're not horribly expensive, and they last forever. The water bath canner we did the salsas and all the tomato stuff with so far, it is also a Presto canner. It's just like 500 years old. So on the lid, it has writing right there with an arrow. We got our 2 inches of water in there, right? Now with Presto canners, at least this one, it has lines on it to show you where to go to. But you fill your water up. It's about 4 quarts worth of. It is 4 quarts worth of water in the Presto's case. I can't speak for all canners. And it goes up to the very first line. That's our 2 inches of water. We got our cans in there. Like I said, we don't want to fill that full. We're just simply going to put our lid on there. One thing you do want to check, I already checked it, so I know it's good, is this gasket. You want to make sure there are no breaks or cracks in it. It's important that that gasket's in good shape. You'll hear some people say that you should lightly coat that with, like Vaseline or something like that, Petro, KY, whatever, that's food safe. No, just leave it clean. If it's starting to get sticky and gummy, because we wash it after every use, the seal, get rid of it and replace it. They're like $6, and if you take good care of it, it'll last forever. So I line that up with, here, let me bring it over here so you can see. So we've got our, now that you can see the silver, but there's an arrow right there and it's lined up with that arrow right there. So now, in order to lock this in place, we just turn it like that, and the seal should be tight. You know, it should not be easy to close. And now that we've got that set up, I'm gonna turn my knob to high, and I'm gonna turn this to where we can see it. Now, I'm gonna watch this pressure gauge. When it starts to move and it gets to about 5, you can see that, and it gets to about 5, I'll turn that down a little bit. Elevation's under 1,000 feet with a pressure canner for almost everything. There are some exceptions, but almost everything. I want to bring it to 11 psi, and I want to hold it there. Once I get it to 11 psi and it's holding steady, I'm going to set my timer. Now, what happens if it goes above 11 psi? We just turn it, we constantly adjust the heat. Well, not constantly, but we just keep adjusting the heat till it stays steady at 11. But let's say it's staying steady at 12. Well, then we're going to probably leave it alone, maybe tweak the temperature a little bit, the heat on the stove. What you want to avoid when doing your when getting this set is big adjustments. So let's say it jumps to 13 and you're like, oh my gosh, don't turn that thing all the way down to low, you know, or whatever. Small adjustments. It's going to take forever for it to correct itself, it's going to feel like, but it will correct itself. So what I'm going to do now, before we even get to that stage, is I'm going to let this start to heat up. As it heats up, two things are going to happen. All right. This button's gonna pop up. This is gonna start producing steam out of it, or air, but it'll come out as steam. Once I get a steady stream and this pops up, I'm gonna wait 10 minutes, okay? That way I ensure all the air is out of here and there's nothing but steam. Once the steam is coming out and that's popped up and I've waited 10 minutes, I will put my weight on, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and wait for that to happen. Once it starts to happen, I'll bring you back and show you what I'm gonna do. All right, I'll be back in just 1 second. Okay, so our tab just came up, and now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna wait 10 minutes. I'm gonna set my timer for 10 minutes, and in the process, I'm also looking for a steady, and you can't see it, but it is happening. But it's a fairly steady stream of steam. I mean, you might be able to see it, but I don't think you can. Of steam coming out right here. What that's doing is it's pushing the rest of the air out of there, so it'll be all steam in this pot. So once that 10 minutes is up, we'll talk about what to do next. All right, back in 1 second. All right, our timer is going off. It's been 10 minutes. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to take my regulator, my weight, and I'm going to put it on there. So now I'm going to watch this gauge. Remember our temperature, I got the oven or the stovetop turned all the way up to high. So I'm going to watch this gauge, and as it moves up, as it gets nearer 5, I'll turn it down from high to about 6. Remember, we don't want to make any drastic moves because I wanted my end game, at least on the oven we had last year, was to get it down to about a little above number 2, almost 3 on this electric range. But that way I end up at 11, you know, and holding at 11. Sometimes it'll bump to 12 and I can't get it any different, but 11's our goal, and in my case 2 to 3 on the number game. So I'll bring you back and when it starts to move up and gets near 5. Okay, I'm at 5 psi of pressure, and whoa, I'm about to knock you to the floor there. And are you there? Good. Sorry about that. Hope you weren't hurt. Let me turn this just a little bit. All right, so we're at 5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this down just a little bit. So I'm going to go from high to about 7. And then once this hits 8, I'll turn it down to 4. And once it gets almost to 11, I'll turn my knob down to about 3. And I'll bring you back when we get to 11, and we'll talk about what we're doing and what I do from there. All right, I'll see you here in just a second. Okay, so we're at 11 now. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to, remember I was talking about small moves with the heat. So what I'm going to do now, because that's going to continue to climb for a little bit, but I'm just going to take this, I'm just going to turn it down a little bit, just like that. Because I know it's going to keep growing, right? Matter of fact, it's already just on the right, to the right of 11. But I want to maintain it on that 11, and I'm going to go ahead and set my timer. So that way it's good to go. All right, so what do we do next? Well, so now what we're going to do, excuse me, is basically hang out around the kitchen. In my case, I've got YouTube playing, I got a movie going, I'm watching Merlin and something. And I'm going to keep an eye on this. Because let's say it doesn't budge from 11 right now. 15 minutes from now, that thing could spike. But you want to be mindful of it. It's not like water bathing, like when we did the tomatoes, where once it starts boiling, you can kind of walk away from it until it's done. With pressure canning, you want to keep an eye on it. You definitely don't want to go to the store or go in the living room and start watching a movie or go outside and play or whatever until this is done. Pressure canning is a little time consuming, as far as that goes. It's easy to get the stuff together. It's a little more challenging when it comes to sitting here watching that gauge. If it drops below 11 at any given time while that timer is running, we have to get it back up to 11 and start the timer over, which is another reason why we want to just kind of sit in here and hang out. That way we ensure it never drops below 11. Let's say it starts to drop a little and you think it's going to go up 11. What do? Just move that knob a little bit. It's like backing a truck up with a trailer attached to it. A little turn of the wheel does a lot down the road, so to speak. So small adjustments, where people get in trouble is they start making huge adjustments on that heat, which can cause just a world of problems inside that can. It can cause things not to cook up to temperature. It could cause your cans to siphon and you lose all your juice. Just all kinds of stuff. It doesn't, you want it to be as even as possible. It's kind of like baking a cake. So I'm going to let this cook for 90 minutes. Almost all meats in quart jars are 90 minutes. Pints are 75 minutes. And beef, hamburger, well, beef in general pretty much. Quart jars 90 minutes. Chicken 90 minutes. Pork's 90 minutes. Most of your gaming meats are 90 minutes. So, that being said, I'm going to let this go for 90 minutes, and when it gets done, we'll talk about what to do next. Alright, I'll see you here in just a minute. Okay, so our timer just went off. We managed to maintain our 11 PSI. It was a little higher, about 11.5 PSI for 90 minutes. So, what do we do now? We turn our heat off. And we're just going to let it sit here. We're going to let it sit here until that little pin drops down. And this gauge reads 0 again. Alright? It doesn't matter if this gauge reads 0. If that pin hasn't dropped, that means there's enough pressure in here to potentially hurt you if you're not careful. And it could cause your jars to siphon. That rapid change in pressure will cause everything in those jars to boil. And they'll boil out, and you won't get a seal, and you'll lose most of your stuff. So, we're going to let that sit there for a minute, and when I come back, we'll take a look inside. Alright, back in a second. Okay, only a couple things left to do for today. So, we're down to 0. Our tab has dropped down. So all we're going to do is lift this lid off, or lift the gauge off, right? I'll set that over here where we always keep it. That way I know where it always is. And we're just going to let this sit for like another 5 minutes. Alright, just the way it is. So we're down to 0. That is open, that is shut. That tells me that there's nothing else going on. We're just going to let it finish settling down. And this is per most pressure canning guidelines. Presto recommends this, that you just simply remove the regulator, let it sit for an additional 5 minutes, and then that way you're assured all the pressure's out. It's still really hot in there. So, and the minute I lift this, even after 5 minutes, there's probably going to be steam coming out of it. And the last thing we want is to get blasted even with a little bit. I know, it's not nice. I've been steam burned before, and it hurts like a you know what. So, I'm going to let this sit for just a few more minutes, and then we can take a look at it and get them out, or get them out of the pressure canner, and we'll take a look at them. All right, I'll be right back. So, our time is up. We can take the lid off. Now, when you take your lid off, like I said, you want to lift it up away from you. Okay, that way if there is any steam that comes out, which there's a little bit, I mean, it's still blazing hot. That was 240 plus degrees in there for an hour and a half. We'll set our lid down, and then I can already tell you without even looking, we probably had some siphoning going on. I can smell the beef. All right, so if we look down, well, I mean, it's not bad. We did have a little bit. I don't know if you can see down in there or not, but there's a little bit of grease sitting on the top of those, and if you look real careful, you might be able to see they're still boiling. So I mean, they're still hot. Now, what we're going to do is, now that we've got those done, is we're just simply going to pull them out, and then maybe I can show you the siphoning that happened. I've been wanting to show you siphoning for a minute, just so you can kind of get an idea of what it is. But once again, we're just going to pull these straight out, right? Because they're bubbling. I mean, I don't know if you can see that. Here, I'll bring it in so you can see it. You can get a close-up look at it. I don't want to handle those too much. They can come back to bite you pretty quick. But right there is our finished product. And you see all that bubbling going on in there? I mean, it's just crazy bubbling. But that's what our beef chunks look like at any rate. And then, like I said, when you take these out, you know, and just like when you're water bathing, straight up, don't tip them, don't nothing. And we're put them over here. And I don't know if I've ever mentioned this before, but when you set them down on your rack or whatever it is you're cooling on, give them some space. That way you get some airflow around them. You know, and you don't. If you don't, yeah, it'll take forever for them to cool. And they're already going to take a good little while to cool. But just like the tomatoes, we're just going to leave these sit here for, you know, the process is pretty much the same after this, even with water bath canning. We're going to let them sit and cool for, you know, 12 to 24 hours. The longer the better. We're going to try not to disturb them in any way, shape, or form. We're just going to kind of walk away from them and let them go. That way they have time to cool. Scoot these over so we got enough room on the rack. And settle. And then just like the tomatoes, after the tomatoes, the salsa, and the rotel we did, just like those, we're going to you know, take the rings off, hold them by their lid. Remember, the lid is the part that's actually on there, and then the ring is what we twisted on top of the lid. We'll pick them up by the lid to make sure they're sealed, and then we will write the date of the day we made them, which today is the 6th, and we will write what it is, which is beef, on it, and we'll stick it downstairs on the shelf. So here, let me see if we can get a better look now at what was going on inside that pot. But like I said, I don't know if you can truly see it or not, but see how there's grease bubbles in there? Granted, there's no beef stock, so to speak, in there, and that's okay. I mean, that's a good thing. That means we were 90% there. But that's what's called siphoning. And what happens is sometimes, and it doesn't matter, sometimes it just happens to happen. And if I had to guess, I'd say it was probably this one. It's the lighter of the two. I'll know better. Actually, no. It's this one. This one doesn't have quite as much liquid in it as the other ones do. And it's got stuff on the top of it, which tells me and all that causes that, it could be you didn't quite get everything off your seal. It could be as simple as there was a little too much liquid in there. Sometimes you never know the reason. Siphoning just happens. But that being said, that's okay, and I'm glad you got to see it. I wanted you to know it's not a bad thing if it happens. The only way that becomes a bad thing in any way, shape, or form is if that liquid would have gone down below half. If it was uncovering, in this case, the beef by more than half, we would just want to stick it in the fridge and use it, or use it that evening. Either way, but that is how we can our beef. And like I said, we'll let these cool 12 to 24 hours. We'll write what it is, the date it was on at the top. We'll take those rings off, and I have a drawer I keep mine in. And we'll check the seal. We'll check the seal of the lid by holding it by the lid. Just like we did in the other 3 videos we've done so far on canning. And that's it. These are good. So Ball says that their lids are good for a year to a year and a half before they run the risk of not staying sealed. So I have had roast beef in jars up to 2 years is the longest I've ever had to keep them. Oh, there went a ping. We got one that's sealed. And I heard 1 or 2 sealed in the container also. But I've had roast beef up to 2 years. So, and hopefully in your house it doesn't last that long. I mean, like I said, we will use these on occasion just for quick meals, things of that nature. But I think sometime in the next video, I know we're going to do, well, I'm getting ready to can chili beans, but I think our next adventure together is going to be mushrooms. Canning them and processing them, especially if you can get them in bulk, it is so much cheaper than even buying the cans. You can do mushrooms for about 50 cents a can, if not a little cheaper, depending on when you get them. Mushrooms, much like meat, I'll wait until I see manager specials, because there is really no minimum to can as long as you're with mushrooms, as long as you're doing more than 1 jar. And I do them in the little jelly jars. So, but it can just save you a lot of money, especially if you can find them on sale, and you get the added benefit of knowing it's a fresh product that is in nothing but, in our case, it's going to be water. And they're really good, and they don't lose their nutrients, and I don't know, it makes me feel better knowing that I put it in the jar versus a company with a machine. So, that being said, I don't know what we're going to do next week yet for dinner or baking, as always, but we will find something to get into, I guarantee it. Until then, I love you. I love you very much. Tell somebody else you love them, and you love them very much. And in times of need, if they need, take them a jar of something over to eat, or make them something with this. Beef and noodles goes a long way, and you'll make friends that way, and confirm a friendship, if nothing else but by food. And it gives you a reason to go over and have a conversation. So, next week, I'll see you for dinner. I love you. Talk to you later. Bye.